So this is my class for today, and I'm going to be teaching them about the CE and the CLR on a sailboat. Alright, today I'm going to teach you guys about the CE and the CLR on a sailboat. But before we do that, I have to teach you guys about wind force. So the sum of all the wind power against the sails is what we call the wind force. And the focal point of that force is called the center of effort. So you can find this by drawing lines through all the sails and connecting the intersections. So if here's your mainsail on your boat, and you have your jib up here, you draw a line between it, and somewhere between this line here is where we're going to find our center of effort. So let's just say it's right here. The center of lateral resistance, however, is the amount of pressure that's laterally giving against the water. So we could call it sideways pressure. And you can actually find this by pushing your boat with one finger in the water, and the point where it doesn't pivot and it starts floating sideways straight, that's where your center of lateral resistance is. And you can actually calculate it by looking at your centerboard and your rudder. And so it's going to be, again, somewhere right in between, probably closer to the centerboard. So despite the fact that this drawing isn't perfectly to scale, you can see how these are kind of aligned. And that's going to help your boat sail straight. So the reason that it's important is because when your boat is sailing with an aligned center of effort and center of CLR, it's going to be performing its best.
That makes sense.
So it's important to keep your CE and your CLR aligned, because when they're not aligned, you're going to either get lee helm or weather helm. And these two things are going to cause your boat to either turn towards the wind or away from the wind. When you get weather helm, you're going to start trying to turn towards the wind, and you're going to have to pull that tiller towards you in order to keep your boat going straight. And the opposite goes for lee helm. Your boat's going to try and bear away from the wind. So this is going to cause you to not be able to steer a straight course, and thus is important to keep your CE and your CLR aligned. So in order to do that, we have to learn a few ways that we can move the CE or the CLR forward and backward on the boat, and thus make them align in different wind conditions. So one of the first ways is to move the sail or rig forward or aft on the boat. What this is going to do is change where your center of effort is, because you're moving your whole sail forward or aft. Basically, you can change where your mast goes in, so you can move it forward or aft on the boat, and thus the whole sail and rig is going to move with it. So let's pretend we moved it aft. What that's going to do is it's going to move your whole CE backwards.
That makes sense.
Which means your center of effort is going to be back here. And if it ever falls behind your center of lateral resistance, you're going to start getting weather helm, and you're going to start heading up towards the wind, and your boat's going to be harder to control.
That makes sense.
So, another way we can do this is to change the efficiency of your sails. If you were to loosen off your mainsail, there's going to be less power in that sail, and thus more up in the jib. And with more power in the front of your boat's going to tend to bear off and or have lee helm. So a great way, if your boat has too much weather helm, is to put more force into your jib by loosening your mainsail. All of you must be familiar with this. When your boat's starting to tip and you loosen out your sails, that's a good way to keep yourself from capsizing. So the same thing goes for loosening the jib and tightening the mainsail. Again, you can give yourself weather helm if you don't have enough by loosening off your jib. Another way is to rake your mast aft. So if you were to loosen your forestay, your mast is going to get a tilt, and it's going to tilt towards the back of the boat, and you can either tighten it or tilt it to change the position of your sails. Let's pretend we're going to rake it back. This is kind of an extreme example here, but I just want you guys to see that what's going to happen is the whole rig is going to move backwards, and thus move your center of effort back a few feet. So raking your mast back or forward is a good way to change the center of effort on a boat. If your sail is trimmed so it has a tight leech, the leech of the sail, then it's going to increase the weather helm. So to increase your lee helm or to decrease your weather helm, you're going to want to loosen the leech of your sail. Again, vice versa. Because what you're doing is you're increasing its efficiency. So another few ways to affect your CLR which is your center of lateral resistance, would be to shift your weight forward, because what this does is it moves the resistance to the fore part of the boat. And with more of the boat underwater, it's naturally going to move the CLR forward. Also, another good way to do it would be to adjust your centerboard. Because your centerboards are on a pivot and they can move up and down, what we are able to do is, instead of having it in the center like this, we can tilt it back a bit, and it's still going to have the same area. And that's going to create your center of lateral resistance much further to the back of the boat. So, let's try something cool. I'm going to give all you guys a pen, and I'm going to teach you a cool trick that really helped me with learning CE and CLR.
Alright.
That makes sense.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold a pen, and my thumb, the one that's closest to me, is going to be my center of effort, and my center of lateral resistance is going to be represented by my forefinger. So pretend I'm the wind and I'm blowing this way. If I move my center of effort forward by putting my thumb forward on the pen, it's going to start bearing away from the wind. You see, if I'm the wind direction, it's going to start turning away. However, if I move my center of effort backwards, like that, and I push in, it's going to start heading up towards the wind. See that? So basically, when it's neutral, you can see how it doesn't turn at all when I press down with my fingers. Again, one more time. If I move my CLR backwards, it's going to bear away from the wind. Remember, I'm the wind direction. If I move it forwards, it's going to head towards the wind. So that's just a cool trick that you can do to remember that. Remember, your thumb is your CE, and your finger would be your CLR. So if you want to just try that out for me. Just hold this in your hand. Okay. So if your thumb is your CE, and you're the wind direction,
Alright.
move your CE forward, your thumb.
So like that.
Yeah, so you can see how it's turning away from him, which means it would be bearing off because you're putting more power into your jib or loosening off your mainsail. And the same goes if you were to move your thumb backwards on the pen. See how it's turning right towards him there? So yeah, you're putting more power on the back of the boat, thus turning it towards the wind, heading up.
Alright.
So that's a cool way to do it if you ever want to just remember really quickly. That's something that helped me out a lot. So now you guys know what the CE and the CLR represent. You know what weather and lee helm are, and you know how they all affect each other. So you know how you can shift your weight or change the sails or adjust the rake in order to move your CE and CLR around, and thus creating a neutral balance and helping your boat sail straight. So now with those tips, you guys can go out and learn how to properly rig your boats so that they'll sail properly in the wind. And that's my lesson on CE and CLR. Hit it.
Sweet.
That makes sense. Oh yeah. Yeah.